One there in the front row.
When the U.S., the current kind of U.S. society that exists today collapses,
Uh-oh, I better leave. Yes, ma'am?
which it inevitably has to do, it's unsustainable. How can we, well, I'm still trying to figure out how can we deal with it. I mean, it's going to be horrible, it's going to be crazy for a while.
That's beyond my
Yeah.
knowledge or even saying. How are we going to deal with it? I hope I'm dead by then. That's what I tell my daughter. We're going to run out of oil one day, but I hope not till after I'm dead.
Well, people don't have a plan to sort of recolonize their ancestral land.
To recolonize their, wow, that sounds interesting. You know, I mean, there's so many things to talk about. You have an indigenous person who's the president of Bolivia now. You have the UN adopted the United Nations Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous People, and with Evo Morales as the president of Bolivia, they adopted the UN Declaration as national law in Bolivia.
Yeah.
A lot of other countries voted for the UN Declaration, but I don't think it's made much change yet. Well, let me tell you, folks, my second book has just been printed in England. It's not even, I don't even have it here yet. And I wrote it with the indigenous professors from Maori, a woman from New Zealand, an Aborigine woman from Australia, and a Canadian First Nations woman. There's only 4 countries in the world that voted against the UN Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous People. Can you guess which 4 countries voted against it?
United States.
The United States, Canada, New Zealand, Australia. Now that might at first be pretty surprising. Why, those are the most liberal, wonderful democracies and countries to live in, aren't they? Why would they ever be against indigenous peoples? Well, I knew the woman from New Zealand already, and so we started talking, and I said, well, we've got to take this doctrine of discovery. England was the primary proponent of it. I didn't even have time to talk to you about how England used it. You just got to buy the book, of course. But I told her, I said, well, our 4 countries were English colonies. Maybe it's England and the doctrine of discovery that this modern day still, hatred's too strong a word, but those 4 countries are just terrified of indigenous people and indigenous rights. And so they're still the only 4 countries in the world that are against that declaration. Now, Australia and New Zealand have now adopted it. So we're down to Canada and that most wonderful country in the world, the United States. Only 2 countries that are still so terrified of indigenous rights and indigenous people that we won't agree to a UN. Like I say, we were the only 4 countries that voted no. 11 countries abstained and didn't vote at all. But 144 countries voted for the Declaration of the Rights of Indigenous People, but not us.
How strong a movement is there for indigenous legal rights here in this country?
Well, I mean, I'd say it's very strong. There's 570 federally recognized tribes. There's 4 million American Indians in the U.S., but that's barely 1% of the population. We're the smallest of the smallest minority,
Well,
practically.
I'm wondering about lawyers.
Well-
How strong a legal movement is there in terms of legal representation? People like you.
In 1973, someone took a count, and there were only 12 Indian attorneys in the entire United States. 12. And there were about 24 Indians in law school at that same time. There are now more than 1,800 American Indians who are attorneys. But that is still way below the number if Indians were attorneys per capita at the same rate average Americans are. There should be about 8,000 Indians attorneys if we were attorneys at the same rate as the Americans are.
How about allies for this movement?
There are some allies, yes. People are starting to have their churches talk about this. I was at a meeting last night, folks, the Episcopal Church in Portland, and the reason they did it is the American Episcopal Church in July of last year at their conference in California passed a resolution repudiating the doctrine of discovery. So the Episcopal Church is against it. Other people I know have tried to get to see the Pope and to get the Pope to withdraw those papal bulls. Why are you guys laughing? But But as a lawyer, and I think about property rights, if the Pope drew those bowls we talked about, that wouldn't change any. It would be a great educational moment, right? To tell the whole world what we did, but it wouldn't change anybody's property rights tomorrow. You know, I wouldn't lose my house, you guys wouldn't lose your house, that nothing like that would happen. But it could be a first step.
How does the Russell Means Dakota seceding from the United States?
If you could hear her, she's asking about Russell Means and what 7 or 8 other Indians said they're going to secede from the United States. The United States deals with tribes as governments, not with individual Indians, and what he did there was invalid. They're just meaningless. Symbolic. I mean, he's great at getting publicity, and he's done some good things for tribes. He's done some bad things. You may know that there's a case against him at the Navajo where they were trying to criminally prosecute him, and he claimed he couldn't be. And the courts finally said, yes, you can be criminally prosecuted. I teach that case in my class every year. The Navajo Supreme Court writes the best decision I have ever read about the power that a government must have to protect its people. Russell Means or not, we don't care who you are, you can't beat up your wife on our reservation and get away with it. So, you know, he's like any human. There's good and bad, right? But seceding from the United States, I think there was a war fought about that, 1861 to 1865, and I think they lost. Oh, excuse me, I saw her first and then you.
Yeah, how realistic do you think it is that the United States government will return the tribal lands to the tribal people?
How realistic?
I mean, do you think that will ever happen?
Oh, that they would. The United States has, in its credit, a few times tried to solve this history of broken treaties. And in 1946, Congress authorized what's called the Indian Claims Commission, and any tribe in the United States that had any complaint against the United States had 5 years in which to bring a lawsuit. And the United States ultimately paid over $800 million to tribes through those lawsuits. So sometimes the conscience hits the United States.
Now, they're talking about money. I mean, a lot of Native American people want the land.
I understand exactly. Now, in American society and English society, land's fungible, right? You take money, you go buy something else. But for Native people who think they were created somewhere or land is sacred, they can't go somewhere else. So the Sioux tribes with the Black Hills case, I don't know how many of you know, but they won their Supreme Court case in 1980, but all they were offered was money. The 7 Sioux tribes refused to take that money. The money sits in the United States Treasury earning interest. It was $105 million when they won the case in 1980. It is now easily $500 million with interest. Those 7 tribes won't touch that money. They want the Black Hills. Now, Senator Bill Bradley, when he was a senator, he offered 2 bills in the Senate to give the Sioux all federal and state lands in the Black Hills, no privately owned lands, but the South Dakota legislature, or what do you call it, congressional representation, which of course is that real liberal Tom Daschle, they were deaf on giving the Sioux any land back whatsoever out of the Black Hills. Daschle just, my God, he turned into a monster on that issue when he was normally so pro-Indian stuff. But no way does anyone in his state. So I know what you're talking about. As a lawyer who thinks you can buy land with money, I guess I'd say take the money and go buy some land. But that does not work for tribes, does it?
Well, I think a lot of Native American people have a whole different viewpoint where they don't think that they ever own the land, that they just saw themselves as stewards of the land.
But they still live in
having a relationship with the land, but not owning the land, and they would never think of selling it. That's, you know, for a lot of natives in their spirituality, it's wrong to buy and sell land. You know, Chief Seattle speech.
Right.
I don't know.
I don't have an answer for you. You brought up one of the conundrums. The United States has several times tried to do something, and it just doesn't solve the problem.
Do you see any educational reform? Like in recent life, there's been a lot of changing opinions on Columbus, especially. Do you see any kind of lower elementary level kind of reform for education?
Well, someone here, was it you who told me that, or you told me that they don't even, was that your daughter or someone?
They didn't
so
want to
Columbus
mention
Day,
it.
the teacher didn't even want to bring it up because of some of this negative stuff. But like she said, the teacher also lost a wonderful teaching moment to prove what Columbus really meant, not this three little ships that sail. Oh, you guys got to see the cover of my second book. We got a Canadian native to give us a painting that he painted in 1992, and the painting's called 500 Years. And it's this native man on the cover with a cross buried in his forehead. And here's three ships. I guess that's probably the Penta, the Nina, and the Santa Maria. Anyway, I mean, education is slow, it's advancing as Indian people become teachers. And she's got a book here that her class right here is reviewing.
It's a curriculum.
I, of course, think my book's better, you know, just duh.
Co-written by a new professor.
Is our dinner food Ariel, is our food getting cold?
Probably.
People will kill me if it gets cold. We can ask more questions out there. We're walking, what, 100 yards to the Longhouse? Let's all go out.
Everybody, thank you for